to our next panel. This is going to be the Denver Metro region. My name's Josh Blum. I am a poor stand-in for the AG Weiser. I am a clinician. I'm a physician at Denver Health and Hospital Authority in Denver, Colorado, and a member of the Colorado Opioid Advisory Council, and the Infrastructure Committee, the Evaluation Committee as well. So I've been asked to stand in and help facilitate a discussion with the Regions group. We have a really, as you can see, we have an expansive panel here in this group, and I think probably by, if this was the House of Representatives, this, as a collective group, you represent probably the largest population of people in the state, so heavy weights on all of your shoulders to do a good job with the Opioid Abatement Council funding. So we're going to start by essentially, I will ask you all to introduce yourselves, here's my notes, so that you're going to at least have a moment for a very brief introduction, the region you represent, your role, and high-level planning. And I think we'll start, maybe just go in order by region. Jim Adamsberger, would you please start? This is Jim Adamsberger from Region 6.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, Jim Adamsberger. I work with Boulder County Community Services Department, and our governance structure is divided into two components. We have an operations board, which is made up of stakeholders and persons with lived experience and other agencies, officials, and they do a lot of the heavy lift around how decisions get kind of considered and how different funding ideas get surfaced. And then that moves into a regional council, which is more the government officials that make the final decisions. So my role in the work is to provide oversight to both of the operations board as well as the regional council, and to support staff in doing that work.
Thanks, and Sarah, would you introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Sarah Mock, and I get all the microphones. I'm with Broomfield Public Health and Environment, where I am our health planning manager, and for the public health folks, that means I get to oversee most of our data collection and also the development of our community health improvement plan, which for us is focused entirely on behavioral health, which segues into us being able to take the lead in the opioid settlement dollars, since we'd already built a pretty robust group of partners to address behavioral health in our community. And we were able to really take that and run with that membership, those partners, and be able to say, we can't start everything new today as this money comes in. What do we have that's already been built on? And I do want to acknowledge we have a couple of members of our regional council in here. Hi, Peggy and Lindsay from the consortium, and then Jordan is our shared person from Region 6 and 7.
Good segue, Jordan, would you go next?
Thanks. Thanks, Sarah. My name is Jordan Godo. I'm the Health and Wellness Coordinator for Boulder Valley Schools. I use she, her pronouns. And as Sarah mentioned, I sit on the Regional Council for Broomfield because our school district spans over Region 6 and 7. And then I also sit on the Operations board with Jim. So spanning a little bit of both worlds to be able to bring the full net of services for our students.
Next from Region 8, we have Steve O'Dorisio. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, she did a great job. Yes, my name is Steve O'Dorisio. I'm one of the county commissioners in Adams County. My background is, before I was a county commissioner, I was a prosecutor in the 17th Judicial District, and I've had the privilege of working with many great people on these issues throughout the years as a prosecutor, and then when I became a county commissioner, was able to work with some folks over in Arapahoe and within Tri-County Health to try to address the issue of overdose and opioids. The challenge that we're seeing in our communities are much like the ones that you guys are seeing in yours. And we're just very blessed to have folks like Rocky Mountain Partnership, who you're going to meet next, who have helped us by applying the collective impact approach by providing data in an organized way of facilitating our processes. And so I'm just excited to be here. It's an honor and privilege to be with all of you and the folks on the panel.
Thanks, Steve. Jody.
And I'm Jody Nowicki. I am with the Rocky Mountain Partnership, as Commissioner Odoricio mentioned, and we are the facilitator for Region 8, which is a single county region. We're an existing backbone team already in the Adams, Broomfield, Arvada, and Aurora region, and so we're able to apply this evidence-based framework to the opioid crisis as it's part of our main mission of improving the economic and social mobility and vitality of our region.
Thanks, and we'll just go down the line. Rhiannon, speaking of facilitation, Rhiannon Strait.
Hi folks, my name is Rhiannon Strait, and I don't know if any of you were in earlier panels, but on this particular panel I am representing the Douglas County Opioid Council, that's Region 12. We are a single county, and this one is particularly near and dear to my heart, not that all of the other ones that I support are not, but I actually grew up in Douglas County. And so being able to engage with this particular council and actually kind of start to chip away at a lot of the challenging lived experiences that I had having grown up there has been really profound and important to me.
Thanks so much for the personal message,
Yeah.
Kendra.
Hi all, my name is Kendra Davis. I work in the Commissioner's Office for Arapahoe County. We are Region 9, we're a single county region. But I will say that listening to all of you folks and all the challenges with coordinating between multiple county regions, I feel a little bit bad. We still have a lot of challenges doing a single county region, and I just want to commend all of you for the hard work that at doing multi-jurisdictional work it takes from people. We have had a heavy educational curve in our county. Obviously this work is happening every day, but I think that our county was a little bit siloed in some of the work that was happening and didn't have that existing backbone that a lot of folks seem to have to lean on, and there was a lot of foundational building and learning that had to happen. So it's been a really great process, and we're really happy to have reached a point where we're putting dollars out in the community and have a good idea of how we want to move forward and grow things moving from here.
Thanks, Kendra. Now we'll turn to the Denver folks. Would you introduce yourselves?
Yes, my name is Marie Curran, and I work for the City and County of Denver, Department of Public Health. I'm the program coordinator specifically for the opioid abatement funds that Denver is receiving as Region 11, and really just in the role to leverage what the regional council is doing with what the community wants us to do, and kind of just getting started in the role and very excited about it.
I'm Jason Smith. I also work for City and County of Denver for the Department of Health and Environment, and I'm new to the role, just 2 months in, but we've already wrapped up our first RFP. We actually sent out the award letters this morning, so we're really excited about that.
Congratulations on that. So I'm going to ask the first question. It's a big panel. I also want to just make a few caveats before we get started. First of all, this panel is going to go till 1:50, so we've pushed everything back 30 minutes. That's been built into some of that extra time's been baked into the schedule, so you don't have to worry about rushing to get anywhere. So we have until 1:50 today before the next roundtable. But the first question, which is really kind of a general, what is a really important thing you've learned from this process? I want you all to answer this question thinking about a little bit, what do you want the audience to take home, of course, and what can a relatively more resourced region, what are the challenges of being in a relatively, maybe a slightly more resourced region, but also with a greater demand on those resources or greater need in a more populous area? How does that translate to things you would want to pass on to other groups? So maybe we'll start the same way we went down the line, starting with Region 6. Jim, would you care to answer about a lesson learned from your experience?
Yeah, so I think we heard this from almost every group, which is that this is a huge, heavy lift and requires all kinds of infrastructure development and processes and governance group development, and it's really like lifting up a whole department. And so I think one of the things that we have tried to take a step back from and learn from is to think about how do you create a early implementation plan where you're thinking across these different areas, because you can get into, I think, a mode of just kind of reacting to everything as it comes up. But there are a lot of common elements that cut across these efforts. And so I think the more that we can do to share across our experience to say, okay, so here's how you can kind of set up governance bodies and the kind of rules that would govern their behavior and decision making. And here are some of the things that you can do from a contracting standpoint. And these are different approaches to allocating resources. These are different ways to kind of resource the overall project so that we're kind of learning from each other about what's the kind of basic infrastructure you need in order to run such a complex effort. These are things that I think we have an opportunity, since we're all kind of doing this at the same time and we're all starting right now, that we should be sharing with each other and figuring out ways to do that so that we're not creating, as a new process for every one of the regions, but we're really learning from each other on how to do that.
So you talk about how we're all like having to do, create the same basic infrastructure over again. I'm wondering if anybody wants to speak. Did anybody have to even go above that and still like start with the basic education and basic facilitation so that everybody's on the same page and understands what the issues are? And we heard from some of the other panelists earlier, just even getting to a basic level of knowledge was an important prerequisite to doing this work. Any comments on that from anybody else?
Oh, thank you. So many microphones. Great. Really make sure you can hear me. Arapahoe County, while this work, as I said, is happening already, and there are folks who are directly involved by virtue of the structure that we had set up, a lot of the elected officials that are participating on our regional council were not directly involved and didn't know, what the baseline was, what the experience was in this county, what some of the services existed and didn't exist, and there was a really steep learning curve. And even after that, we had to emphasize that this wasn't a one and done, we know everything, we checked that box sort of process. There's no way for you to get a good handhold on exactly what the problem is because it's so complex and it touches so many different areas and people and needs that even if you have an understanding now, that understanding might change in a week, in a month, in a year. And we really just need to be able to be flexible and have the right people at the table to continue that conversation and that learning.
Thanks. All right, Sarah, we'll go to, yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, that's me, still. I'll just kind of build off of what Kendra was saying about the learning curve and the partnerships, is that has been, I call it our public health superpower, is this ability to bring partners into the room and be able to acknowledge that we are not going to be the experts on everything. I am not a behavioral health clinician. I don't know that world as well as the other partners in the room. So how do I rely on them to provide me that information? And part of our process of taking over the opioid settlement dollars to convene that group out of our public health department was being very strategic and very methodical about who is showing up to our meetings. I'm going to literally list out on a spreadsheet who has shown up, who is consistently coming, what sector do they represent, and who am I not seeing, and why isn't that? I need to go back and build that relationship a little bit better. Somebody else on my team already has that relationship. Can they bring that person in? So it was really this very, I guess I'll just repeat myself, methodical process of looking at who is coming. We didn't have anybody from our faith community. That was a gap for us. We filled that, and it wasn't hard to do once we knew that it was there, but we had to identify that for ourselves. And I think with that partnership means that I'm learning from all of those people along the way as we move forward and figuring out what it is. I think the other gap we found was criminal justice. I mean, obvious, right? But it wasn't obvious until we mapped it out, and now we have really good relationships with our detention center, our police officers, our municipal courts. I mean, it's been really, really well established that we can all work together and learn from each other.
Those are great points. You mentioned a couple key stakeholders that you didn't know were missing until you realized they were missing. And did anybody else on this panel struggle with that or realize that you actually didn't have all the right stakeholders or subject matter experts at the table that you needed when you started this process, and what did you do in response to that?
I'm happy to speak a little bit to this one. So in Douglas County, we ended up spending some of our money on prevention. And the Stedman Group, the consulting firm that I work with, spends a lot of time early on doing exactly what everyone else has been talking about here, and it's helping to recruit and identify the right folks. We thought we were about done in Douglas County. We thought we had all of the people there. And then we started having to have conversations about Douglas County school districts and what prevention looks like there. And we realized we had no one from the schools on the council. And so we did exactly what some of you all have discussed, and we kind of tapped into our networks and asked anybody if they knew anyone who worked there. And this was an interesting experience for me because I was emailing old friends from high school who happened to work at the high school in Douglas County to kind of loop folks in from the school district. So I think this kind of speaks to what Kendra said earlier about needing to be flexible and grow as you learn. And for us, we probably wasted a portion of a meeting because we realized we couldn't answer questions, we couldn't move forward on prevention until we got folks to the table, but we paused. Someone else said earlier, you've got to go slow to grow, I think, and this was a good example of that in Douglas County.
Excellent. Anybody else want to weigh in? Any other surprise stakeholders? Any other surprise lessons from building the cars you drive it? Can also keep moving down the line. Jordan, wearing your hat for Region 6 and for 7, maybe. Would you like to talk about, maybe a key lesson learned from you in this process, something to take away?
Well, I think for us it's really unique because between the two regions, they're serving 6 school districts, and we just happen to be the one school district that's over both of these regions. And so whether we're looking at prevention, I know that there's going to be breakouts that are related to prevention. There's another breakout, and then treatment. But it's not even that clean across. Talk about another regional map is the school district map. And we don't do things always the same, but we've been really fortunate to be partnered with Adams School District, Adams 12. And they have been able to copy and paste all of our processes that we went through to implement Narcan in all of our schools. So really, it was really without community support. Once the tabloids started coming out about deaths in our community and the scare that was coming through in such a small area, Boulder County is, City of Boulder, Boulder County, is about 100,000 people. Does that sound about right? So it's actually not that many people for a Denver metro region, and the first reaction was, what are we doing and how do we save the children? So we jumped in right away to be able to get that support, and it was great.
Did anybody else implement, or any of the other regions, since you brought up naloxone in schools, did any of the other regions, has that been part of your plans or things that you guys have done with some of the funding?
Well, talk about this a little more. Oh, sorry. In Denver, and we'll mention this a little later, we are expanding with this first round of proposals. We were able to fund networks in schools, education in schools, and access to naloxone and overdose education for youth, and particularly in the school-based setting.
Well, I was just going to say, you already mentioned Adams 12, and they had already implemented that, and a lot of our school districts already had been doing that by the time funds were getting out the door, and so we've been able to invest. I think Adams 12 was one of the more, maybe the second largest grant award for this first cycle, doing prevention and education to build on work that they had already done around that.
So Steve and Jody, do you guys want to speak about your, I think, most important take-home messages you'd like to share?
I think when it comes to some of the lessons learned, I will tell you that there's some things that we've done right and some things that we're continuing to work through. I think overall as a state for the lesson learned, I'm going to call it the Weiser way. Phil Weiser's way of pulling people together, regardless of political party or affiliation, and allowing us to negotiate with him on how these funds could be distributed. He really at the beginning said, well, this should be centralized and all that. It's what you expect from a state person to say. But then he listened, and then he negotiated with us. And there's a lot of folks in the audience. I know Leslie was there, and a lot of folks, representing cities and counties. And he was able to collaborate and listen. And it is phenomenal, I think, to think that one of the best lessons learned is a positive, to see that you have one of our state leaders who can sit up here on numerous panels with folks from around the region, regardless of party, and say that there are ways for us to come together. So that's a positive lesson learned, I think, that should be repeated in other areas of state policy. Number two, I would say one of the other benefits, I think, a positive lesson learned, has been to hire a facilitator that can help kind of keep us, and for us it's Rocky Mountain Partnership, the collective impact approach has allowed us to really methodically and professionally go through and identify what our needs are, what are our gaps, identify the stakeholders, and allow to have that facilitator not be pulled into what could be parochial arguments or discussions about politics or this organization is everyone's favorite or not. They've been able to facilitate objectively to help us make, I think, better decisions. And then the final one has been a challenge, is just to make sure that we, as a region and everyone here, live up to the requirement the commitment, I should say, that we all made to make sure that the money is, that we all do this in a way that is transparent and accountable. And so what that means is, along some of our lessons have been that some of the organizations that come out and ask for money, we have to lean in a little bit more on our due diligence to find out their financial viability, their reputation, and even who the leadership are in some of these organizations. Because we know that if we don't do that right, then we lose that flexibility and freedom that Phil Weiser and his team negotiated to give us. And so those are some of the lessons I think I would say that I feel a couple good ones and a couple that we're continuing to improve on.
Yeah, and I would echo all of those and say, from the facilitator process side, there's a lot of lessons around those things, and already having really great conversations with the COAC around ways that there can be more standardized risk assessments and questions to ask in applications of things, so we don't have to learn those the hard way, or that multiple regions don't have to learn those the hard way. And I think the other lesson, and I don't know if this is a lesson learned or just something maybe we're looking forward to as we think about all this money coming into the region, there was a strong sense of urgency to get dollars out the door, as well as wanting to balance that with the due diligence of making sure that they're allocated in a way that will truly have impact, and that we're setting up the infrastructure to have the data transparency that Commissioner referenced. And so I think we've done a really good start at that, and have a lot of other things that are happening right now around setting a regional target to reduce the number of opioid-related overdose deaths in Adams County, and working really closely with our health department to use I had to write it down, a Z-score approach for predicting deaths to develop the target, like the data people, and vetting that with the content experts across the region, state, and even country, so that not just the council is aligning the dollars from the litigation settlements towards achieving that target and using data and community voice to inform those decisions, but also supporting our other municipalities who have local shares to align to other stakeholders across our region doing this work, so that we really truly are approaching this epidemic as a region and as a community.
So, thank you. That was an excellent answer. I think we've heard a lot in these panels on the importance of the facilitation from an organizational, structural standpoint, from a data to action standpoint, from keeping eyes on the prize of getting the money out there to the people most affected by this. Are there other pieces that you think the facilitation or other key points to what facilitators bring to this process? For those facilitators here, do you have any other lessons for other regions?
to jump in on this one. Jody, I like what you were just talking about because I think it kind of speaks to the importance of, thank you, sometimes I'm too loud. It speaks to the importance of finding a balance between progress and engagement, or like getting things done, but slowing down and doing them right. And so I think when we all first got involved, there was all this excitement and all of this money, you know, once in a generation amount of money coming. We got to spend it. We got to use it. We got to do it. And finding as a facilitator a balance between identifying those low-hanging fruit items that were massive gaps that we needed to address immediately with our first couple of years of funding, and then taking a step back and being more intentional and strategic, as Jody has also outlined really well, moving forward to actually get us to the finish line in a way that continuously produces outcomes that are what we want to see and productive. That's been tough, and it's taken a lot of flexibility from the councils. So thank you to all of you who deal with all of our incessant emailing and checking in and like doubling back and kind of reassessing how we want to go about things. Finding that balance has been tough, and I think it's going to be something that we'll continue to have to juggle and kind of be flexible with as we move throughout the course of the settlement.
Kendra, would you care to add anything around important take-homes from your perspective?
Yeah, I want to say one thing that is kind of related that I've heard some people in this panel mention, and then in previous panels as well, is that we talk about these processes and we say the word waste, and we talk about wasting our time and time slipping through our fingers because we didn't have people respond to our RFPs, or we spent time focusing on one thing, or we didn't have people in the room. And I just want to emphasize that some parts of this are about the journey and not about the destination, and that a lot of the work that you're doing, even if it's not producing the best application to an RFP or the best proposal for the gap that you've identified, you're still having the conversations you would not have had before. You're still bringing people to the table and having these discussions. You're creating these connections, and you're creating a foundation for making better decisions in the future. So I caution anyone who's trying to who's thinking about things and the time lost in a sense of loss, and more that you're building something better. And I think that's one of the things that having a facilitator has really helped our region, is continuing us moving forward. You know, if we had an RFP that had a proposal that wasn't exactly what we were looking for, and having a facilitator as part of that process really helped us reframe the way we were thinking about that gap, and thinking about how that would get us closer to it, and if not solve the problem completely, and making sure that we were moving forward as opposed to just spinning our wheels and being concerned about not getting exactly what we wanted. So having the facilitator has really helped us get to outcomes as opposed to just talking ourselves in circles, which can often happen.
If I can add to that a little bit too, is what you said is our team likes calling it failing forward or learning forward, or, you know, my CEO and I talk about that. Like, if I have one more opportunity for a lesson learned today, I can't. But it's true, and I also, you know, as a shout out to the AG's office team and Jack in particular, there's a lot of adaptive challenges that we face, and there will be times I will call and say, well, who else has had this happen, even if it's in another state, and the answer I often get is, well, Colorado's really leading the charge, so we're gonna figure that out together. And so to your point that it's not wasting time, but we're also hopefully not only learning lessons in individual regions that other regions can learn for, but other states as well, as this work continues.
Thanks so much. That's great. Now I want to just turn back to the Denver group. I would love for you guys to weigh in on your lessons learned. I'd also love just a placeholder, and anyone else can jump in on this too, is to think about your lessons learned in when you're in a region that really is, you know, we're obviously have a lot of people in these multiple regions that abut each other, but our our clients, the patients, the people in need, don't necessarily pay attention to these regional boundaries. How did that, if at all, color your process?
Well, I think the most important lesson we learned coming out of this first RFP was the value in having very diverse voices at the table, talking about what programs they think should be funded. In this first round, we had a mix on every panel of city and county staff, community-based organizations, and people with lived experience. And we were able to compensate the people with lived experience for their time, which I thought was very important. We got feedback and like valuable insights from people on the front lines doing this work every day that we wouldn't have had if we were just reviewing these applications internally. And the reviewers were really invested in the process, really passionate about their choices, and happy to spend an hour and a half talking about the merits of different applications. And the things that were brought up were things that I would have never thought of from a contract and finance side. And so every panel also had a lot of concern about making the RFP process equitable, and there was concern that the process could be weighted towards these giant organizations that have grant writers on staff that know how to do this, and that there might be smaller community organizations that are getting left out of the conversation. And so moving forward, we're going to look at how we can make that a more equitable process and not leaning towards the sexiest, the fanciest package of an RFP, but actually what type of work we want to see.
It's a great point. How do you level the playing field for everyone, for the big, for the little guys in the field with the bigger fish? Did you find some things that actually, specific strategies for that have you discussed?
Well, we have some ideas, for our next round. And one other point was that it's such a broad scope, the RFP that we put out there. Some of the reviewers mentioned it's kind of hard to review an application for a treatment program against an infrastructure application, and there are different ways we're going to try to look at that to see how we can group different organizations together.
Yeah, and also a matter of how you weight, or the weight you give certain scoring, on the rubric, how much weight do you give to semantics or writing style versus content. So those are things that, we'll definitely have a keen eye toward on our next RFP. And I think to your question about the people we serve don't really care about county lines. In our RFP, we just specified that we wanted the organizations to primarily serve City of Denver residents. And I think it's really going to come down to each organization, each program's operations, how they function. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for inter-regional collaboration that is totally untapped because we're all just getting our footing in our own regions. But I think that will be really helpful, especially those organizations that do serve people who live or move between multiple counties and districts.
Yeah, thanks. On that topic, does anybody, obviously all of us who live in the region think about that, how do we cooperate well with our neighboring regions? I'm wondering if any of you, including those of you who facilitate multiple regions, have any thoughts about that, or ways that we might do a better job going forward, or for those in the audience who are in a region where it's multiple counties that are trying to cooperate, any advice on that topic?
I'm going to just quickly jump in and say that the way that the AG's office broke down the regions for these panels in and of itself would serve to some good breakout sessions for regional councils to put their heads together and figure out what we all are interested in funding. So shameless plug, Jack, if you want to help make that happen, that could maybe be really helpful for moving interregional projects forward. As a facilitator, I hope others can relate. This is a lot of work, and the thought of looping in an additional group and aligning with their priorities can feel daunting. And the conversation that we held in yesterday's session, the financial track about interregional collaboration, I think was an incredible start to really identifying the needs across regions. But I really like how these panels were broken down, and I think kind of smaller group discussions could serve us all really well in the future.
Please.
I don't always think it needs to be as complicated as we make it in our heads either. We are the green highlighter smudge in the metro area as Broomfield. So we're kind of tucked into everybody else's world, and we recognize that, and that's great for us. We know that about ourselves, so as part of what we do, we just had the great fortune to have our library and municipal courts be a distribution site for Narcan. So anybody can come into the library, no questions asked. I'd like some Narcan, here it is. And we're really proud of that. So we shared that information. We told Adams County Public Health, we told Boulder County, we told our school districts. It's just like this information sharing out too. Just let them know that you have moved forward with this. It was your choice for your region. And now they can take it and run with it or not. It's their choice now. The ball's in their court. So I don't know that we get really tied into this, like how do we combine our RFPs? How do we have a shared mental health center? How do we do all these really complicated things? What are the small things? And that's building your relationships with those partners as well to be able to be that information sharer, and maybe you guys now have another connection point. So I think there's ways to make it easier on ourselves too.
I think there's an opportunity also for all of us individually, but also as the state to help coordinate. As we go through this first initial year or two, and we're doing our asset inventory and identifying gaps, to be able to sit and compare notes at a very detailed level and say, okay, Jefferson County, what are the gaps that you have? And is there opportunity that something that we have that is your gap, we might be able to help fill in one of your gaps, or is there an opportunity where we both have gaps to fill it in together? And I think if we can get to that point, of course this first year or two, I expected us to kind of get our own things together internally and figure out who we were, but I think we're going to get to the point very quickly where we can start having conversations with our neighbors and discussing gap filling.
Well, and I just want to mention, not to sound like a Pollyanna or anything, but we're doing a lot of the hardest work right now, which is building those relationships and assessing the gaps and the weaknesses. And I don't think there's a single person here who doesn't understand the challenges of bringing all these people to the table. And after you do that, it'll be a piece of cake to do it with different regions. You heard it here first. It'll be a piece of cake.
So we only have a handful of minutes left, so I think I just want to we'll open up to the whole panel, let you guys decide who wants to answer. Then, knowing what you've already built this year, what all this incredible work and the information sharing that's already going on, and looking forward to next year's conference, and we'll just lock everybody in a room from the regional panels and then keep it locked for a couple hours, and you can figure it all out. But what are you most looking forward to in the coming year, or to build on the successes that you've had so far this year? What do you think is a high priority, and what are you excited about?
I can start. I don't know that it's necessarily just this coming year. I think we've been handed a real gift in the way these dollars have been provided to us. We can really take the time to think about what's a good way to utilize these resources in the most strategic manner possible. We have flexibility in terms of hiring facilitation, developing good evaluations. We have enough of a long enough time frame where we actually can make adjustments. And it's so rare, I think, in the work that we tend to do that we have that kind of flexibility, because we're typically paying attention to when's the next report due, When is my funding up? When do I have to start thinking about sustainability? So I think for me, it's just that we've got such an incredible opportunity to really spend the time and think about this and learn from the work that we're doing over time. And also, I think, to the extent possible, there are opportunities to really look at how to combine this with, say, ARPA funding or the big focus now that's on behavioral health, so that we can layer in a real comprehensive system, because there is a tendency to be very siloed in the work that we do. So how do we, from the beginning of this, really think comprehensively about not just how we use these resources from a system standpoint, but also how do we bring these resources into the system that we currently have so that we can, over time, seek better alignment, better outcomes, kind of thinking about what Michelle Barnes talked about earlier around kind of whole person. Like, opioids are really key in this particular funding stream, but we also have an opportunity to really combine this and think about how do we think differently about health and approaching these issues in a more comprehensive way.
I'm really excited. I want to share a little more about what Jason mentioned earlier, which is we've alerted 15 programs that they are going to be receiving the first year of funding. So these are community-based organizations. And it's such a wide range of projects, and I think we're just really excited to see all the work that's been going into this turning into dollars in hand in these organizations. We're funding 6 programs that are brand new. These are pilot programs. They're primarily from pre-existing organizations, but the funds have allowed them to set up these entirely new pilot programs. And the other 9 are to help enhance and build existing programs that are already working in our community. I just wanted to name off some of them that we're doing. We're be helping to build a new treatment facility, helping increase mobile outreach, having on-site behavioral health technicians, purchasing a van for a residential treatment program to actually drive their clients to appointments, wraparound services, funding a pilot program for culturally responsive peer support, a lot focused on youth. We have 4 programs that are specifically youth focused. I mentioned access to naloxone in schools, school-based substance use intervention, and just building a network of peer mentors. We have a couple public health campaigns that we'll be funding, anti-stigma, and then just a opioid education campaign, and then some first responder training and fentanyl wastewater surveillance program. So such a range. We're really excited for that to be happening. And then we also know this is just the very beginning, so we'll be getting started on what the rest will look like, but we were able to allocate $4.7 million, our entire requested amount for this first year of settlement funds, to those projects.
Very impressive, yes. Just a follow-up question to that was just, how do you let the public know about this? How do you get the word out around this? And it's obviously the work that all of the ROACs are doing is so amazing. And how do you make sure that your public knows what you're doing, what's available, and what these funds are actually, how they're translating to helping the people who need it?
Yes, we're taking right now a little conservative approach because we want to get confirmation that these programs indeed want the funds. We got to get the contracts in place, and then go on the press train, issue a press release, and hopefully have some community forums. We're working on that, what that will look like, ensuring that our Denver Regional Council is super transparent, open to the public. So we have a long way to go on that, but I think there's a ton of opportunity to get the public involved.
So one of the things that we're really proud of in Adams County is the Adams County Opioid Abatement Data Hub. And it not only includes data that helps illustrate the current state that's disaggregated through an equity lens, so overall, what do opioid overdose deaths look like, and for whom do they look different? But we also have inventory of assets that exist, and what I'm really excited about is that now that we've been awarded, it's just about $2.7 million for this first cycle. We actually have one of our awardees here today that we're going to be having them each report key performance indicators on a quarterly basis that will be transparent and on a special tab that has that level of transparency, not only for our council and the public, but also to support our grantees to be keeping track of those and not just doing an annual report to say, well, did what we said we were going to do work, but is it working? And having the support of the Rocky Mountain Partnership team to also be available to those grantees to support them with the continuous improvement process if that's something that they're open to, if things aren't working as intended. So really excited to see those data now coming in. We have the KPIs listed of what they will be, but to start seeing the progress that's being made.
That's amazing to hear about. I think, AG brought up the quote from Louis Brandeis about, I think it's actually light is the greatest disinfectant, but also it's the way to communicate all the amazing work that you're doing, making sure the public knows, making sure your partners know. We talked about communication between the different regions or the different ROACs of the Front Range region. Obviously, lots of money coming to this area, but also the most number of people who need the assistance. So I think all those of us who live in the region feel very blessed to have such an esteemed group of people working on this issue. So I'd love to have a big round of applause for the panelists.
You all hear me? We also making a round of applause for our COAC member, John Blum, because he actually got a round of applause. 1 hour notice. Yes, thank you. 1 hour notice that he was going to be moderating, and I think he did a remarkable job. And thank you, everyone, for the panelists, and actually through all the regional panels. You know, I've been doing this work for 10 years, and I learned so much, and was so inspired, really. And so I just hope that this is the start of the conversation. And that you think, hey, what did they do in that one region? We just begin to discuss what are our challenges. And I really appreciate how people talked about what are the real challenges, how can we be humble about it, where do we need to grow? And I heard loud and clear the voice of lived experience and compensating folks if possible. So we have built in our excellent wisdom, and I would like to thank our team, the opioid response team, Jack Patterson, Robin Sawyer, Christian Dyson, who have all been very thoughtful. We brought 30 minutes extra built in. So we're moving everything down 30 minutes. So you don't miss a break. We're not gonna do that to y'all. We will go right now to the roundtable discussions. And then everything is just going to move back 30 minutes. So we'll have our networking break start at, now my math, I had this in my head. We're going to start now, and then we'll have the networking break, which has our breath work, start at 3:15. Am I getting that right?
2:45.
2:45, thank you. I didn't have a pen to write it down. So 2:45 is when we're going to have our breath work, and then 3:15 is when we're going to have the public awareness. So 2:45 is breath work, and then 3:15 is public awareness, the Connect Effect. Really, you want to be in here for that. That's when we make our big launch about our public awareness campaign. This hasn't been shown to anyone. This is, y'all are seeing it first, and you're kind of getting that soft launch, and then it's going to go live. So make sure you're back here by 3:15. And then we're going to have a youth panel. So real youth coming up here saying how they're going to use it. We're going to have the voice of lived experience. And then we'll have our food trucks. So there's amazing things ahead. But we really want to thank you all because sometimes it can be tiring too, right? You're sitting in the here and listening to a lot. But it's also so inspiring. And it's so incredible how you're all sticking in it and doing this work together for the purpose of making a difference. So I'll let you go. The next one is the prevention, which is in the south room. So south is going to be the one on the far right. North room is going to be treatment and recovery. And then the center one is harm reduction. So for those of you in person, if you would want to make your room to the breakout session, this is just an informal session. Again, prevention is in the south room. Treatment and recovery is in the north room. and harm reduction is in the central room. And for everyone online, we're also going to have Zoom options for you to join virtually that are going to be facilitated by our consortium staff. So everyone online, you'll just now be getting the links in the chat to join the Zoom link. If you're in the treatment recovery, you'll get one link. Prevention is another. And then harm reduction, you'll stay in the main webinar Zoom. Thanks, everyone.